what's up, guys? Today we answer life's biggest questions and knowledge gaps with our most engaged audience member, Tom Iberg. Say what's up, Tom.
What's up, everybody?
We answer questions like how to escape a job you don't like, how to figure out what industry to get into after college, all that and more today on the Knowledge Gap Show. Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Joe Ignace. I'm the host and founder of the Knowledge Gap podcast and show. We're here with Tom Iberg, good friend of mine. We actually work together at my fitness company, Elevate Wellness and Personal Training. And Tom, how's it going today?
It's going great. I'm excited to be on the podcast. I'm ready to talk about some stuff and put some more knowledge out there and fill the gap.
Yes, let's go, right? Help master people's purposes. It's going to be good. Reason we picked Tom on today is not only is Tom an incredible personal trainer with Elevate Wellness, and you also check him out. I'll put a link in the description. But also, Tom is the most engaged listener on the podcast. He is commenting, liking, watching almost all the content we put out. So he's a big fan, which we really appreciate. And if you want to be on the podcast at some point, we will do questions from the audience, let's say once per month, depending on the engagement. And if you're the most engaged person, we will have you on the show. You can ask me anything you want. No limits at all. So it'll be fun. So, and we're going to hop into questions here in a second, but just some good news from the show, from the Knowledge Gap brand in general. We just established our first Knowledge Gap club at University of Tennessee. So if you're somebody who wants to join and get a guide on mastering your purpose as a young person, go join that. There'll be a link in the description where you put your contact info out. I'll have the president, Trenton, reach out to you. We've officially, the Knowledge Gap Foundation has gotten its first donation, and that's going to be getting resources for high school kids and college kids to help them figure out what they want to do, in their life, which is going to be pretty cool. So we'll start having speakers and stuff like that from there. And good news for the Knowledge Gap Consulting Services, the first podcast that we've been helping start, she has her trailer out, which is really, really cool. So we'll put that out on socials once she's ready to launch here in the next couple of weeks. Sweet. So Tom, let's go, bro. Let's ask some questions. Let's get into it.
Okay. So the first question I'd like to start with is for those who went to college per se and just get a business degree and didn't specifically go to become a lawyer or a doctor, what advice can you give them to help them find a career they can actually grow?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is like a two-part answer to this one-part question, right? Like, how do you find your career if you're not a lawyer, doctor, have a specific major that's, going into a professional career somehow? And most importantly, what if you find out at the end of school, you spent all this money and you hate what you're doing now? Maybe you got into it and you want to switch, right? So I think the two things of that is looking at college, the whole purpose of college in general, and then figuring out how to pivot. Right. So college in general, I think people go into it because it's just the next step, right? We are told that we go to high school, we go to college, we graduate, we work a job. And when you look at like high school, the way it's set up, it's like high schools were created so you would kind of be like a factory worker. When they ring the bells, it's like you're going to the next thing, the next job, right? And you just learn all of this basic stuff that isn't really beneficial in the real world. Like you're not going to be using most of the information. Right. So what you have to look at college and high school as, the only skill that you really need to learn is how to learn. If you can learn how to learn, you can essentially learn anything. That's what the knowledge gap is. If you want to be successful, you just have to go and figure out how to get it. So all you need to do is learn how to learn. Right. So instead of, in college, being on your phone in a classroom like I used to do in college, pay attention to how the speaker is speaking. Are they good? Are they bad? How are they setting up the information? Does it make sense? Learn what they're doing well, learn what they're not doing well, because at some point you might need those skills, right? Learn hard math not because you'll ever use it. If you have to take the stinking class, right? If you're going to take a math class and you have to use it, or have to take it in order to graduate, well, learn how to do it because you're training your brain to learn hard stuff. Don't give up. Don't cheat. That's a huge problem. People cheat all the time, off of, whoever, their neighbor, and online. And when you take an online test, you can Google everything, which, for some of those basic classes, I totally understand why people do that, because it's a waste of knowledge. It's like, oh, I'm not going to use this. Why do I need to, learn it? It's about the principle, really, because, in real life, it is true that you can Google most things. And that's actually how you can do a lot, like learn a lot, is you Google lots of things, which is why like college kind of, in a way, doesn't make much sense, nowadays. I bet you, I was thinking about doing a documentary on it, actually, of going into classrooms, recording what they teach, and then Googling it all. And it's just free everywhere. Like that's kind of weird, right? Why they charge so much for that. But Anyway, so college, the skill you're trying to learn is how to learn. And the other skill that you need is networking. That's it. If people like you, they'll hire you. If you're able to learn, they'll hire you, right? And so college is a tool. So whatever major you're getting, pick the one that's most difficult that most people can't do. Because if you can, in college, learn some skills that you can actually market for yourself later, or they're good background knowledge, that's great. So if you've got those two skills of how to learn and network, right, it's really just like what lines up with your purpose, right? And that means you got to figure out your purpose first. Like why do you do anything? And if you never spent time reflecting on it, that's really normal, because most people don't, right? Most people, unless they have a mentor, father, mother, somebody who's basically like, hey, like, why do you want to do anything? We just go to the next thing, in our lives, the next step of, dopamine release, right? It could be social media. It could be like, well, I guess I'm supposed to get this next thing. So I'm supposed to get this job, I guess. And everybody does it backwards, right? So they do, okay, what major am I going to pick? How am I going to go graduate with that major? And then why am I doing this? And the answer is usually money, I guess. Most people don't know why, right? And there's nothing wrong with money. I think money is like a fuel. It's the more money that you have, the more people that you can help, but I think the purpose needs to be lined up with helping people, right? So why do you do what you do, right? That's the big question. And the simplest way to kind of get your mindset in the right quadrant of your brain, because we think logically oftentimes, and in order to figure out your purpose, you actually have to get slightly emotional about it. If you're not slightly emotional, then it's not going to mean anything to you. So the question I always ask to young people is, hey, if you were hovering over your funeral in spiritual form, it's your funeral, and you have a son or daughter, whatever, right? Surviving spouse. You have the most important person in your life talking about your life. What do you want them to have said about who you were, how you lived, and why you did stuff?
That's
and
solid.
if you're like not sure, just think for a second. What do you not want to be? What do you not want to stand for? And if you don't want to be a liar, a cheat, lazy, it's like, obviously you're going to do you want to start embodying the opposites of those things, for example, right? And there's certain jobs that line up, right? So if you want to be a good dad, you want to pick a career that's going to allow you to show up to your kids' baseball games, for example, right? You want to create a job entrepreneurially that allows that to happen. If that's not important to you, that's fine. No judgment there. It doesn't matter. But point is that there's ways and things that you want to do in your life, and there's careers and certain jobs or businesses that you can own, work with, that will either allow that to happen, or it will be in conflict. So you find the industry that's not going to conflict with your purpose.
Yeah, that's really good. Almost just from like what you've told me, just to dive deeper into that question, do you think it's more important for someone that just graduated college to first find out who they are themselves before looking to a career? Because that kind of goes with the purpose that you have and like what your mission is. So do you think it's more important for them to first ask the question, who am I?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's not a simple answer, that's for sure. I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan. I would recommend a bunch of his books, but the first book that I read, and I was lucky because I went to a church, and they had this class where you go through this thing called Strength Finders. Now, by no means is this going to solve all your problems, but for me, it was my first stepping stone, so I'll share it. I took this test. It was $25, $30. There's like 100, 200 questions, whatever it was. But in Strength Finders tests, there's you get a top 5 and a top 11. Well, there's only like 5 people in the world who have the same, or maybe it's 11. There's only like 5 to 11 people who have the same top 5 strengths as you in that order. And then there's no one with the same top 11 strengths in that order in the world, which is really good. And so that's like the best personality test I've ever taken. So my top strengths were restorative, learner. Lucked out on that one, huh? Woo, communication, and then positivity, right? So I'm an idealist. I like seeing things grow. I like seeing things be restored. That's why, I have a propensity to, philanthropic, endeavors, wanting to help people. The purpose behind me doing stuff is to help people. That's it. I don't want the personal, oh, make me look great. I actually am a believer that there's a point where you really shouldn't spend over a certain amount on a house, because what's the point? It's an object.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's where I kind of come from. So I would do something like that, because learning that I was restorative really aligned with all the things I was interested in. I used to play this old video game. I don't know if you know what it is. You know what Rome Total War is? Did you ever play that?
No, not quite.
Dude, this
I'm
is
not
the
familiar with
geekiest game you could ever play. But I enjoyed that game because you're like over an empire, and you're building up an empire from scratch over and over and over again.
Okay.
And it's so funny, when I'm an adult now, 25 years old, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm starting things from scratch over and over again. It's super enjoyable to me. But knowing that I'm restorative means that since I enjoy the freedom and creativity to build things, it's not really the perfect, corporate factory worker. So I knew long-term that my goal shouldn't be to get up the company ladder to president, because I'm just going to be working on something that's already here. Right. And that doesn't mean go reinvent the wheel. There's good partnerships, but find where you can help, uniquely.
Going back to you being a serial entrepreneur, I remember in one of your past clips, you talked about the gap and how it's where most people give up when they're starting things like this. What keeps you going and prevents you from like giving up?
Sure. So that's based on a book called The Dip by Seth Godin. So a lot of these ideas I'm just sort of regurgitating for some of these guys, right? I don't claim to be the smartest person in the room every single time. In fact, I want to be humble enough to realize that a lot of people know more than me, but that's an idea worth sharing is the idea, right? So that book's really good. So basically he just looked at all these different industries, right? And he said, you know what? The best flavor of ice cream overall in sales ever is vanilla. Nothing else comes close. Like it's like 6 times more profitable to sell vanilla than chocolate, right? But having the other flavors, lots of people like the different flavors, but vanilla is the best. So being the best in an industry, right, is more important than having a product that's okay. Because the best, you're going to get 6 times, 10 times, whatever amount. I don't remember the actual stats from the book, revenue for your business, for example. So he says, basically every industry has a barrier to entry. That's what we call the dip. It's when people quit because it gets hard, or it's impossible because of the resources that you currently have at that time, right? If you're trying to break into the sports clothing apparel market, you're competing with Nike and Adidas and all these massive billion-dollar companies, right? If you're trying to break into the iPhone market, you're competing with iPhone, right? Or Apple, you're competing with Apple, you're competing with Android, these megalith, huge companies, right? And so the idea is that dip is so steep that there's only a few companies that can have the resources to eventually get into the market where they'll have enough people buying their services to make money from it, right? So the idea is that, okay, well, what industry do you enjoy that you like, that lines up with your purpose, that's also got a dip that you can enter that has exponential growth, right? So at the end, right? So how can you later on, like 20 years from now, are you going to still be able to grow in that industry, right? Or no, is that not going to ever happen, right? And so the idea is you find a career, you find a job, you find a business that you start or whatever, that when you get past the dip, there's a small enough percentage on the other side that there's a big enough opportunity for you to win. And if you can find something where you could be the best at in that niche market or whatever it is, if you can be the best, you go and do that.
So is that what keeps you motivated though? Is knowing that you can consistently do that and then become the best?
Yeah. What motivates me is that in high schools across the country, there's a problem. And the problem is kids graduate and then 88% of them, hate their jobs their entire life. There's a lot of organizations that help people find jobs, but there's not a lot of organizations that help people figure out their purpose. And so after researching and like getting feedback from, the audience, it's like, this is a needed thing. I was like doing a ton of research on how to make this channel. And by no means am I the best YouTuber ever, that's got Mr. Beast on, his name all over it. But, when I was doing research and researching how to do research, there's not a lot of YouTube content with lots of views on like humbleness and service when I was searching, different ideas like that. And so, yeah, that's a place where I think I have a very unique perspective that's somewhat, pretty controversial, but it's a needed voice that needs to be heard, because there's a lot of people that could, I believe that if we were helping kids figuring out their purpose earlier and how to help people more, we could really make a huge change in the world in a really positive way that helps people, self-actualize and be happier. It's not a utopia, it's like, you got to go get it. You got to go make stuff happen. The whole point of that dip is like, that's when most people quit. It gets so hard. Most people quit. That's an industry you want to be in. When it's so hard that most people quit, that's something that most people don't have. Right. Which means now your skill set's valuable, your mindset, your knowledge, valuable.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the point, right? If you can figure it out, other people don't want to, because, like in our David Goggins episode, when you get to the edge of your talent, right, you stop trying to learn the thing because it's hard. I don't want to do that. Let me pay someone to do it. Well, there you go. There's a job. Figure out what they're willing to pay you for. Go learn that skill, especially if it's something you like.
That's a good
You
way
know?
to put it. And that kind of even correlates with when you get out of college and how you can find an industry that you like. You find
Yeah,
a skill that you enjoy, and then you go find somewhere you can potentially make money doing it.
exactly. So the dip, right? So there's probably only almost no one who goes and does door-to-door sales anymore because it's like the hardest thing probably that you could do. And I did it in college. It's the hardest way to sell for sure. But if you can do it, you're able to, you'll never go hungry. People will hire you left and right because of the sales ability that you'll develop, and I believe doing it in an ethical way. I think there's some companies out there that do it in a not very ethical way. And it's more about the money. But I worked at this one company where, you'd go into a town that you've never been to, no leads, and you would literally cold call, but then you would turn the town into a town of people who knew you, who you were, and you would know every family like in that town, and you would sell really, really well. And just most people aren't able to do that. And so that's a valuable skill that people are willing to pay for. They want to know how you did it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Is that
So
like a small town kind of thing?
yeah. Yeah. Well, you start in a small town and you build up into a, larger town, larger cities. And so, when you're building a business, people start too broad. So if you're really broad, you're not going to talk to anybody. So you've got to go to a place where people are going to start knowing about it and start talking about it word of mouth. So like for all my speeches for the podcast right now, I'm just going to the University of Tennessee, or I'm doing like a professional speech because, at the University of Tennessee, those are my ideal students. I'm right next door. I want to help the clubs there. My club's there. Well, it's really the students club, but the club that I want to, that I'm sponsoring, that being a part of and helping get off the ground for this mission of helping young people master their purpose. That's where if all those students start talking, it'll get to other campuses. If it's me going to every campus, it'll never get anywhere.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Sweet, Tom. Thanks for being here. Thanks for asking some questions. If you want to be on the Knowledge Gap show, just be the most engaged person in February, and I would love to meet you. And where we're going to be chatting a lot is on Discord. So the Discord link is in the description. So that's where you can ask questions, give topic ideas for the podcast. I literally want this to be like an audience run podcast where we're talking about things that you want to hear about. Like I've literally just been spewing ideas that I think you might like, but I'd really just want to do things that you want to hear about. So you can, take your steps on your path of success, figure out your purpose and master that thing and go after it, whatever it takes to do it. If you're not subscribed on the podcast, do that. So when you're driving, you don't crash. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that kind of stuff. And if you've made it to the end of this video, kudos to you. You're incredible. You're the kind of people that we like to talk to who are not completely addicted to social media to where they scroll before the last 5 seconds. So please subscribe and join our growing community of purpose-driven people.